Before we dive into this story, make sure you hit that subscribe button, tap like, and share this video with someone who loves emotional, dramatic stories, because what you're about to hear isn't just about a divorce. It's about betrayal, justice, and the kind of revenge you'll never forget. At our final court hearing, the room was silent except for the sound of the judge's gavel echoing against the walls. The judge looked at me, Daniel Hale, and asked in a steady voice, "Any last words, Mr. Hale?" Across the aisle, my wife Clara leaned back in her chair like a queen already crowned, her diamond necklace glinting under the fluorescent lights. Her lawyer, Mr. Grant, smirked, "Enjoy your new life. You'll be leaving with nothing." But I only smiled and stood tall. "Actually, yes," I said, "I do have something to say." The fluorescent lights hummed above, casting the courtroom in a sterile, merciless glow. Every wooden bench, every rustle of paper felt heavy with judgment. The air smelled faintly of varnish and sweat, and beneath it all, the metallic taste of finality. Judge Wallace adjusted his glasses, his voice calm, almost indifferent. "Mr. Hale," he said, "before I make my ruling, do you have any final words?" Across the aisle, Clara shifted with calculated grace, crossing one leg over the other as though she were posing for a portrait of victory. Her red lipstick curled into a smirk that cut sharper than any blade. The diamond necklace at her throat shimmered, and Daniel knew, because he had paid for it, that it was her chosen crown for the occasion. Her lawyer, Mr. Grant, leaned in, his chuckle meant for Daniel but loud enough for the courtroom to hear. "Enjoy your new life," he sneered. "You'll be leaving with nothing." Laughter flickered in Clara's eyes, cruel and triumphant. "You should have been a better husband," she whispered, venom disguised as advice. For a heartbeat, Daniel let the silence hang. He felt every gaze turn to him, some pitying, some expectant, some relishing the spectacle of a man stripped bare. His pulse slowed, his breathing steady. Months of preparation had led to this single moment. He rose, shoulders square, not a trace of fear in his movement. When he spoke, his voice was calm, unshaken, every syllable deliberate. "Actually," Daniel said, his gaze sweeping across Clara, her lawyer, the judge, and the gallery, "yes, I do have something to say." A hush fell over the courtroom, thick as fog. Clara's smirk faltered just enough to betray a flicker of unease. Mr. Grant leaned back, trying to mask curiosity with condescension. Daniel reached into his briefcase, fingers brushing against the folder that held months of buried truths. Each page a blade sharper than any insult hurled his way. What came next would not just be words, it would be the beginning of her unraveling. 6 months earlier, the night was ordinary, or at least it seemed that way. Daniel sat at the oak desk in his study, sorting through a small stack of bank statements. Numbers and dates blurred together until one entry snagged his attention like a nail-catching cloth. 2 glasses of champagne. Midnight. A luxury hotel downtown. The receipt was charged to their joint account. Daniel frowned, tracing the printed name on the folio. Ryan Cooper, a trainer from Clara's gym. Someone Daniel had shaken hands with once, never suspecting the weight of that brief encounter. The room seemed to tilt. His chest tightened, a cold wash flooding his veins. He pressed the receipt flat against the desk, reading it over and over, as though repetition would make it vanish. But there it was, time, date, cost, all undeniable. He sat back, the silence of the house pressing in. The tick of the wall clock grew louder, crueler. His mind began to stitch together moments he had ignored, the late-night texts, the sudden perfume lingering after Clara's extra hours, the hollow excuses about work dinners that didn't match her calendar. A storm of rage swelled inside him, but Daniel didn't shout. He didn't break anything. Instead, his breath steadied, like a diver sinking deeper into dark waters. This wasn't suspicion. This wasn't a maybe. This was confirmation. 1 week later, Clara filed for divorce. She didn't cry. She didn't explain. She simply declared irreconcilable differences with a tone rehearsed for sympathy. Through her lawyer, Mr. Grant, she demanded majority of their assets, arguing that Daniel had been emotionally neglectful. Neglect. The word sliced at him, almost laughable. He had built their life with his hands, his time, his heart. Neglect was her excuse, her shield, but Daniel didn't argue. Not yet. He nodded through the paperwork, feigned passivity, let her believe she had the upper hand. In truth, every muscle in his body coiled like a predator waiting in silence, because if Clara thought this story would end with him broken and penniless, she had no idea that she had just handed him the first piece of the puzzle he needed. The betrayal was real, but so was the revenge that would follow. Daniel did not confront Clara. He didn't throw the receipt in her face or shout accusations across their living room. He chose silence, because silence, he realized, was sharper than rage. When Clara spoke to him in clipped tones about moving on, he only nodded. When her lawyer painted him as a neglectful husband during mediation, Daniel bowed his head, feigning defeat. To everyone else, he looked like a man broken. But behind his calm eyes, an iron resolve was forming. At night, while Clara slept in the guest room she now claimed as her own, Daniel made phone calls, quietly, patiently. He hired an investigator, someone with no ties, someone discreet. He asked for everything, her texts, her financial movements, her meetings. He wanted her shadows mapped out. Weeks passed, and with each passing day, Clara grew bolder. She returned home late, reeking of perfume he didn't recognize. Ryan's name surfaced more often, disguised as just a friend. Daniel said nothing, but the investigator delivered file after file, and every piece of evidence felt like ammunition sliding into a chamber. Daniel also turned his gaze to his own empire. The company he had built, their company, as Clara liked to call it, was his life's work. He knew she would come for it. And so, with steady hands and meticulous foresight, he began to move the board. He transferred patents and intellectual property into a children's trust, untouchable by marital claims. He made himself look dispensable within the company, then quietly indispensable in ways no court could untangle. And while Clara smiled in public, imagining her triumph, Daniel was laying invisible snares. One of his most decisive moves came quietly. He purchased, through a shell corporation, the very building that housed Clara's boutique. She had poured her pride into that store, calling it her independence, her future. Daniel signed the deed without hesitation, his name never appearing on the record. 3 weeks later, the rent mysteriously tripled. Clara ranted over dinner, furious at her greedy landlord. Daniel listened with perfect sympathy, even offering to help her find legal aid. Inside, he nearly smiled. Every step she took was a trap she didn't see. Every insult she whispered only fueled his patience. She thought she was winning. She thought he was drowning, but Daniel wasn't drowning. He was waiting for the perfect moment to pull the floor out from under her. The files grew thicker with every week. Manila envelopes slid across Daniel's desk like chapters of a novel he never wanted to read. But he did read them, every detail, every message, every receipt. The investigator had been thorough. Surveillance photos showed Clara slipping into hotel lobbies with Ryan, her hand curled possessively around his arm. Screenshots of encrypted chats revealed late-night rendezvous planned with cruel precision. Bank statements painted an even uglier picture. Wire transfers from Clara's father's trust into Ryan's struggling supplement company. Money funneled to keep him afloat. And then there was the pregnancy test. Positive. Later discarded. The report confirmed what Daniel already suspected. The child hadn't been his. Each discovery might have shattered another man. But for Daniel, it only forged him sharper. He compiled the evidence with the precision of a craftsman, time-stamped photographs, signed credit card slips, text logs carefully extracted from hidden drives. Nothing speculative, nothing emotional. Pure, irrefutable facts. Clara's lawyer, Mr. Grant, had painted Daniel as negligent, apathetic, a man undeserving of sympathy. Daniel let the narrative stand. He let the whispers grow. The more the world saw him as broken, the harder the fall would be when the truth emerged. At the same time, Daniel moved with quiet strategy in business. He didn't just protect his assets, he transformed them. He shifted control of the company into legal structures Clara couldn't touch. His signature disappeared from places where hers still lingered. By the time the divorce proceedings began in earnest, Daniel looked like a man stripped of power. But behind the curtain, he was untouchable. The final blow came when his investigator uncovered Clara's handwritten notes. Drafts of false claims, abuse fabricated for leverage, neglect scripted for sympathy. Her words became weapons against her, proof of deliberate fraud. Daniel read them in silence, his jaw tight, his pulse steady. This was no longer about betrayal. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about truth, about exposing every mask she had worn, until there was nothing left but the hollow face beneath. By the time Discovery Day arrived in court, Daniel wasn't nervous. He wasn't even angry. He was ready, because when Clara and her lawyer walked into that courtroom, they believed they had already won. They had no idea the avalanche waiting to fall. The courtroom was tense, a theater waiting for its final act. Papers shuffled, pens clicked, and every eye rested on Judge Wallace as he prepared to deliver his ruling. Mr. Grant stood tall, his folders color-coded, confidence radiating. Clara lounged beside him, her smile wide and venomous, convinced she had already buried Daniel beneath lies and legal language. "Your Honor," Mr. Grant said, his voice smooth, "the evidence is clear. My client has endured neglect, abandonment, and mistreatment. We request majority ownership of all assets in accordance with the law." Judge Wallace turned to Daniel. "Mr. Hale, any final words before I rule?" Daniel rose slowly, unhurried, his briefcase in hand. His movements were deliberate, his composure unnerving. He met Clara's gaze. Her smirk wavered. "Actually," Daniel said, voice steady, "yes. I'd like to submit one final exhibit." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Mr. Grant frowned, visibly annoyed. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." "Proceed," the judge interrupted. Daniel opened his folder and placed a stack of documents on the bench. "Exhibit 47, he said. "Surveillance footage, time-stamped credit card transactions, and financial records linking Mrs. Hale to Mr. Ryan Cooper." He flipped the first page. Photos slid into view. Clara entering hotel rooms, her arm around Ryan. Receipts of champagne at midnight. Wire transfers from her father's trust to Ryan's failing business. The judge's eyes sharpened. Mr. Grant's smugness faltered. Daniel continued, unyielding. "Additionally, Your Honor, a DNA report confirming that the pregnancy my wife concealed was not mine. Evidence shows she attempted to use this for leverage during negotiations." Clara's face drained of color. Her hands gripped the table so tightly, her knuckles whitened. But Daniel wasn't done. From the folder, he pulled a single handwritten note. "And finally, a confession." He handed it to the bailiff, who carried it to the judge. The courtroom leaned forward as Judge Wallace adjusted his glasses, reading aloud, "I fabricated claims of abuse. I diverted marital funds. I coerced testimony. I created false records of neglect." Signed by Clara Hale, dated 3 nights ago. A sound escaped Clara's throat, a desperate gasp. She turned to Mr. Grant, who looked pale, his jaw clenched, his eyes darting between the confession and the judge. Judge Wallace's gavel struck once, sharp as thunder. "Motion to dismiss granted. Case closed. Sanctions will be imposed against Mrs. Hale. Half her estate will be redirected to cover legal fees." The courtroom erupted, papers rustling, whispers swelling like a storm. Clara collapsed into her chair, trembling, her crown of arrogance shattered. Daniel stood tall, untouched. For the first time in months, he allowed himself the smallest of smiles, not of cruelty, not of triumph, but of liberation. The game was over. The courtroom emptied slowly, its echoes fading into silence. Reporters swarmed outside, cameras flashing, microphones reaching. But Daniel moved through them like a ghost through glass. He had no statement to give, no words to waste. The judgment had spoken for him. Inside, Clara sat frozen in her chair. The queen, who once smirked in victory, was now dethroned. her kingdom crumbling around her. Half her estate gone, her lies exposed, her reputation scorched. The boutique she clung to for pride, already foreclosed, its deed resting quietly in Daniel's pocket. And Ryan? By the time Clara stumbled out of the courthouse, her phone buzzed with messages. Not of comfort, but of desperation. Ryan needed money, rent, debts, excuses. He had vanished when the spotlight dimmed, leaving her with nothing but shattered promises. Outside, snow drifted from the sky, soft flakes landing on Daniel's shoulders like indifferent confetti. He pulled his coat tighter, breathing in the clean, metallic air of freedom. For the first time in years, he felt light. No chains, no anger, just space where a future could finally take root. He hailed a cab, sliding into the back seat. As the city blurred past the window, he exhaled, steady and free. He traced a single line across the fogged glass with his finger, a line dividing past from present. Sometimes, he thought, you lose everything to see what was truly yours. And sometimes, you let everything go to prove who never deserved it. The cab disappeared into the night, carrying Daniel toward a new beginning. And now I'll leave you with a question. If you were in Daniel's place, would you have stayed silent and planned revenge, or confronted Clara the moment you found the truth? Comment your answer below. I'll be reading every single one. And don't forget, subscribe, like, and share this video if you want more powerful stories of betrayal, justice, and redemption. Your support keeps these stories alive.